and then essentially they lured him out of the bar because he was gay and proceeded to beat him to death for that reason. And what I did, as part of the research, Ed, was I traced all the different iterations of that story. The story that was told by Aaron McKinney in his recorded confession, the story told by Aaron McKinney's girlfriend in her statements to police, the story that Aaron McKinney's girlfriend told within a couple of days to television, to the media, and then the stories of people that, what I was able to reconstruct from many public documents and the interviews that I did. And that initial narrative was simply false. And, at the beginning of the book, I use a few short excerpts from the major news media, including the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the Denver Post, Time, Newsweek, and give you a picture of how coherent the view was of what happened to Matthew Shepard on the night he left the bar with these two men. Now, what is absolutely certain is that it was a horrible murder, a grotesquely violent murder, and that Matthew was killed. And, and I say this in interviews all the time, nothing we learn about the murder excuses this, horrific act of violence. But the circumstances around the murder, the motives, were far more complicated than the public was led to believe, and many people understand even today.
Oh, yeah, I would totally agree with you. And I remember following the case on Court TV daily and chatting about it on the Court TV message board daily when the trial was going on. And in my personal experience, I've seen that when these big media events come to town with all these big satellite trucks and they take over all the parking, they take over all the restaurants and the bars and all the hotel rooms, that these guys come into town with a storyline in mind. And they kind of create the story, and it's been my opinion that they kind of not control, but they influence these major trials that go on. And you see it more and more today with cases like Jodi Arias and these big trials, Casey Anthony.
Yes.
Right. Now, what do you think about that real quick?
Well, I think now, let me just take you back, in this case, to the prosecutor. He argued, and successfully, to keep cameras out of the courtroom because, the memories of O.J. were too familiar, and he just said, we're not going to have a media circus. Now, when this case began, and he had a reason to believe this, Ed, the initial indictment, the media there were so many reporters in the courtroom, the judge was sitting on his bench hyperventilating with all of the boom mics surrounding him. The prosecutor described to me reporters under his desk in the courtroom. And so there was a sense very, very quickly. Now, we're talking about before Matthew Shepard. This was a few days before Matthew Shepard died, okay? Matthew Shepard was still alive in the hospital. So at this point, the pending charges were attempted murder. They weren't even murder yet. And you're absolutely right. People descended on Laramie. The prosecutor, I use his quote in the book, he said, every time they returned to town for the various trial proceedings, he said it was like a swarm of locusts.
Yeah. And people in town, because right away they won't, because listen, you're in the news business as well, and you want to interview the mayor, you want to interview the chief of police, you want to interview all the big shot lawyers in town. So everybody there knows what the storyline that is required. They know what they have to say to get on TV. So everyone just kind of goes along with it as well. That I've seen in these guys. I'm here in Vegas,
yes.
and when we had the OJ trial here, it was just amazing. They just took over, and this is a big town. So I can imagine down there in Laramie. Okay, so now where did this whole version that it was a hate crime, a homosexual gay bashing hate crime, where did that initiate?
Okay, well, it began with two friends of Matthew Shepard, Alex Trout and Walt Bolden. Walt Bolden had been a friend of Matthew since Matthew was 15. He was then teaching at the University of Wyoming in Laramie. Alex Trout was a younger man, about Matthew's age, both of them gay. And Walt Bolden received a call from Matthew's father, Dennis Shepard, in Saudi Arabia with the news, because Dennis Shepard had gotten news from the hospital in Laramie that Matthew had been seriously injured, that, a horrific beating had taken place. And with that news, Walt Bolden and Alex Trout went to the hospital. Very quickly, they moved Matthew from Laramie to Fort Collins, Colorado, where they had better hospital equipment. So at the hospital in Fort Collins, Alex Trout and Walt Bolden began calling, they called some media and called gay organizations in Wyoming and Colorado. They called a particular friend of Matthew at the Casper Star-Tribune, which is the town where Matthew grew up. And this got picked up very quickly by the Associated Press, and the story went out very quickly. Ed, I'm just going to go back for a minute to something you were bringing up a moment ago about these other cases and how fast something can take off, and when the media descends on a town.
Right.
I think it's also true that when politics intervene, particularly before all the facts were in, the facts are in, that it's a dangerous situation. And in this case, as soon as the word went out that this appeared to be, and Matthew's friends said, this was their worst fear, that it was an anti-gay attack, that Matthew was beaten because he was gay. But they had no direct knowledge, anything that I've been able to find over the years, no direct knowledge of the crime itself. So this got picked up very quickly, but it also became not only sensationalized by the media, but it became very politicized. And, that weekend, Bill Clinton made some public statements about the case, and it went, to me, to my mind, beyond wishing, expressing his empathy to the Shepard family and hoping that, the investigation and justice would take its course. But he then added, a statement about the importance of passing a hate crime bill that was then stalled in Congress. To provide some context for your listeners, James Byrd Jr. had been dragged to death in Jasper, Texas 4 months earlier in June of 1998. So there was a sense, there was a feeling, that hate crimes are happening. We need to do something about them.
Right. The story of James Byrd. Let me interrupt for 1 second. The story of James Byrd, where two white racists grabbed this black man, James Byrd,
yes.
in Jasper, Texas it was?
I always wanted to explore my business potential. Florida Technical College helped me make that possible. Thanks to FTC, I earned my degree in entrepreneurship, marketing, and management. I am an Iris Bermudez, and I work in finance.
See why Florida Technical College has been the choice of people like you since 1982. Learn more about our careers in business and in information technology, including entrepreneurship, management and marketing, and more at ftccollege.edu or call 888-981-9707. FTC, your partner in success.
Going back to the school can be difficult, but Florida Technical College showed me the way. Thanks to FTC, I got my diploma in medical billing and coding. My name is Carla Finol, and now I'm working as an NBC office coordinator.
See why Florida Technical College has been the choice of people like you since 1982. Learn more about our diploma, associate, and bachelor's degree programs at ftccollege.edu or call 888-981-9707. FTC, your partner in success.
Yes, Jasper, Texas. He was dragged to death. They dragged him to death on the back of a truck, and he was killed that way.
Right.
And
horrific.
I haven't researched that case, but everything I know about it says that it was a de facto hate crime, that that it was a racially motivated killing. Okay? So the thing is that this now Shepard happens 4 months later, and so this is catching fire very quickly. Again, the prosecutor referred to it as a wildfire. Within a couple of days, okay? The media is descending on Laramie. The president is talking, okay? Gay activists around the country are mobilized. You're having very quickly protests and vigils in New York City, in San Francisco, not just in big cities, but also in smaller, then a smaller city like Denver, but across the country. So it's a very volatile moment. And if I may, just to say, give you another piece of the story here, and I did this story. I'm a gay man, okay, and I felt that the truth of what I learned was important. But that year, the gay community was feeling under siege because this was a period when the culture wars were, the so-called culture wars were really heated. Trent Lott was making public comments that gay people are like, they're sinners, and compared them to kleptomaniacs and alcoholics. Pat Robertson made some a particularly inflammatory comment that spring, and there was a campaign, an active public relations campaign convincing gay people that they could go straight. So you had a moment in the gay community where the community was feeling very under siege. So I'm not excusing anyone's rush to judgment, but as soon as the media is legitimizing the idea that this is an anti-gay hate crime, as soon as that news got put out there, gay people naturally responded. Someone is taken and beaten to death and hung on a fence because they're gay. Well, we're going to take to the streets.
Mm-hmm. What about this case was the introduction of the Westboro Baptist Church as well. This was the first time that they came on the scene and got national attention, wasn't it?
I don't know the history of the Westboro Baptist Church, but I have to say I thought their behavior showing up at Matthew Shepard's the funeral service, I thought it was despicable.
Well, did you know, though, that but the thing is, you got to remember, this is a tiny little group. It's not even a group. It's a family. There's only like 10, 15 members of this entire
group.
One more time?
Yeah. But what I was going to say, I don't know the history of the Westboro Baptist Church. And when I say I think the behavior is despicable, I think the idea, and I'd say this, I feel the same way about them that group showing up at the funerals, for veterans that have came back from Iraq or Afghanistan, to show up, at Matthew Shepard's funeral with signs saying, God hates fags and this kind of stuff, to me, was nuts. But the fact is that, you have a scene here. It's a small group, but the public officials didn't know how explosive this thing could get. There were sharpshooters on rooftops there. Matthew Shepard's father, Dennis Shepard, was wearing a bulletproof vest when he came out to speak. The prosecutor, Cal Raruka, didn't even go to the funeral because he was advised by federal officials that it would be more prudent for him not to go, that it would be safer for him not to go. He received death threats during the course of this. And I know that the federal government was afraid that the situation in Laramie could erupt into another, Oklahoma City bombing kind of scenario that, over the issues that seemed to be at stake here. So it was a very highly charged moment, Ed.
Yeah, I could imagine. But it just seems to me, though, that this group, this obscure group, as racist as they are, as homophobic as as evil as they are, was elevated to a national exposure. And I'm sure, and now everybody knows who they are now, and we've kind of like given them all this credibility and all this exposure and all this attention and free publicity. I guess I'm doing it myself right now by mentioning them. But I think that they would have fallen away into obscurity if not given the publicity that they were given in these movies that you see that were made about this case. And that's just a little personal gripe
You're probably right.